You are listening to Did You Hear?
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 The Johnson County Library Podcast.
We are coming to you
From the Central Resource Library
in Overland Park, Kansas.
This is your Library Insider.
In this episode of Did You Hear, Dave Carson hosts ScienceTeller, Brock Hatton, and Youth Services Librarian Jayma Zook to share the details about the action-packed and educational adventure Aliens Escape from Earth. Then you've probably heard Youth Services Librarian Dennis Ross on KCUR recommending kids' books. It turns out he's not too big of a star for our meager podcast and suggests some great space-themed kids' books. Join us as we go deep inside our summer reading theme, A Universe of Stories.
Welcome back to Did You Hear, where we continue to explore our summer reading theme, A Universe of Stories. And we have so many different programs for you around that theme, and a lot of them are for kids. And so today I have one of our Youth Services librarians. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jayma, and I'm out at Gardner, Spring Hill, and Edgerton.
Excellent. And you have a guest with you?
Yes, I have Brock from ScienceTellers.
Okay. Hi, welcome. And I want to go ahead and read about your event here. It's ScienceTellers. Aliens Escape is an action-packed and educational adventure about an unusual meteor shower and family of visitors from another planet. It's totally out of this world. The story is energized by audience-activated chemical reactions, demonstrations of Boyle's Law, energy transfer rainstorms, and much more. Wow, that sounds really cool. So, Brock, what's your role in all of this?
Yes, so I am a science teller. A science teller is part scientist, part storyteller. So I use, throughout the story, or throughout the show that I tell, for the first part of the show, I tell a story to the audience. And throughout that story, I use science experiments to basically enhance the story and use special effects to bring the story to life. And then for the second half of the show, I actually bring volunteers from the audience up and demonstrate the science experiments that we've done throughout the show to demonstrate the science experiments for the kids and actually explain the science behind the special effects that we've performed throughout the story.
Wow. So would you consider yourself a performer first or a scientist first, or are you both have feet in both worlds?
I definitely do. Actually, I went to school and studied biomedical sciences, as well as got a minor in theater arts.
Okay.
So
wow.
I was studying science the entire time I was in college while performing on stage the full time. Currently, right now, I am a full-time performer. I act full-time, but I am using my science background in this show to help teach kids about the science behind the experiments that we do in the show today.
Wow, and wow, how important to, introduce kids to science, and you seem uniquely qualified to bring that to life and make it fun and more accessible.
I mean, I love this job. Because
Did you have a lot of fun doing it?
Oh, yes, definitely. The kids are always so excited to be there, and the experiments that we do are engaging, and the kids are always excited to, be hands-on with the experiments, because we do a lot of things where, we really need kids to reach out and touch the experiments and really be involved in making them happen. So
wow. Well, so tell us about these experiments and how they augment the story that you're telling.
Yes, of course. So throughout the story, Aliens Escape from Earth, it's a story about a duo of a brother-sister duo who find a crashed alien spaceship in the forest, and through some mishaps and adventures, they come across the villain of the story, a crazy space scientist called Dr. Cosmo, and he has trapped a family of aliens in his secret underground lab, and Haley and Caesar have to help those aliens escape from his clutches. And throughout the story, they run into slimy green alien goo that is gross for the kids to touch and feel, and they have to help them blast off in their rocket, and they also run into a giant windstorm storm and a rainstorm, that all of these experiments are help narrate the story along and show the kids. So there's, a film canister rocket that we shoot off when the rocket blasts off into space.
Neat.
We bring out a leaf blower and teach the kids about wind energy, as well as rain energy, and transfer of energy from the wind to matter as well. We also teach about, as you mentioned, Bohr's law, so the idea behind pressure and how gas expands and fills a space entirely. And once that space is filled, where does that air pressure go, and how it expands beyond the capacity of its container. So it's a lot of really cool, blast off sort of situations, but as well as teaching the kids the science behind how those blast off happen.
And I imagine the parents are probably learning quite a bit too.
It's true. I always have parents come up after a show and thank me for, at least teaching them something as well as their kids. So it's really fun.
Well, Jayma, let's make sure everyone knows where and when these are. What's the schedule?
Sure, we have ScienceTellers are coming to 3 different libraries. They will be at Blue Valley Library on Thursday, July 11th from 10 to 11 a.m. They're going to be out at Gardner Library Tuesday, July 30th from 10 to 11 a.m. And then later that same day, Tuesday, July 30th, they'll be at Central Resource Library from 2 to 3 p.m.
Okay, great. So we have multiple offerings, but it's also limited. Is there limited space, or
There is going to be limited space because at each of those locations, there's room capacity. So definitely show up a little bit early because I think this will be a really popular program.
Oh, I think so too. And so I should describe how Brock is dressed.
Oh, yes.
So,
please give
so
them the full...
we were all joking. It's like, well, we need to go out to the lobby of the Central Resource Library where we're recording this, and we need to find Brock. How are we going to find him? And one of my colleagues, Mary, joked, well, look for the guy in the white lab coat. Close. He was wearing a lab coat, but it is very colorful. It's very, it's a tie-dye,
it's
right?
Tie-dye, yes. It's rainbow tie-dye.
Yeah, rainbow tie-dye.
This is ScienceTellers identifier. All of our ScienceTellers throughout the country. There are 49 ScienceTellers across the nation right now.
Wow.
And we all are showing off our tie-dye lab coats. This is how the company started because ScienceTellers really has an idea of making connections between the audience and science and really connecting between community and a library. And we feel that if, that the white lab coat really sort of makes it sort of a little too clinical.
Yeah.
Exactly. And showing off the bright tie-dye makes science approachable and fun and really exciting. And also, me up there in a white lab coat isn't as exciting as to watch as me dancing around in a rainbow colored.
Well, so I take it there are other stories than you all tell.
Yes, this season, based off of the the program Universe of Stories, the ScienceTellers is doing Aliens Escape from Earth this year.
Right.
Next year, it's a completely new story. It's called Dragons: The Return of the Ice Sorceress. That one is all about there's a lot of like dry ice experiments with fog and
fantastic.
blowing like really cool fog bubbles and everything. So yes, the story changes every year.
So
every
annually.
summer.
Okay.
Yes, we'll be doing this program through the next year until May. So we'll be going around during the school year as well, going around to schools and education programs across the nation, telling this story until May, and then we switch over to the new program after May of next year.
So do you determine certain scientific principles that you really want to hit on in a particular year, or is it more based on what the story is and what kind of scientific principles you can draw from that?
Yes, it typically is based off of the nationwide idea of the reading program for the summer, and so Universe of Stories was the story for this year, and they decided that telling that story would be best through the Aliens Escape from Earth story, but I believe next year's is a fantasy idea, and so they decided to switch it up and go with the Ice Sorceress story. So the idea sort of spawns from the reading program for the nation, and then we plan our science experiments with our partnering company to build science experiments around that sort of idea.
I see.
And see how we can expand the science experiments that we've already done in the past, and how we can change and alter them to better, teach and narrate our stories.
Yeah,
for the future.
and really any exposure to scientific principles and scientific experiments, and just encouraging curiosity.
Oh, exactly.
And hopefully these kids will explore and want to learn more about science.
Yes, and we after the show we always pass out a little card that actually has a science experiment for the kids to do at home too, to help them. If in case they want to keep that curiosity going and perform these experiments at home. There's an alien goo experiment that they can do at home with their family and make their own alien goo at home, which is really fun.
That is very exciting. So are you sensing from the parents and the kids that you work with, Jayma, are they pretty excited about this event?
Yeah, I went and promoted at the schools summer reading, and this was one of the programs that the kids were really excited about. I think because they get to participate in it.
Oh, definitely.
And I was telling them that, oh man, I'm going to have to clean up after this one. And so they thought that was pretty funny too. So yeah, they're pumped about this one.
Well, so if we could remind people once again, when and where?
Sure. So at Blue Valley Library, ScienceTellers will be there Thursday, July 11th at 10 a.m. They'll be at Gardner Library Tuesday, July 30th, and they'll be at Central Resource Library Tuesday, July 30th at 2 p.m.
That sounds really great. Brock, you have anything else you want to add?
No, I will be performing in all three places at all times. So, yes, I am the representative for the Kansas City and surrounding area. Great. We have, like I said, we have 49 of me and my fellow Science-Tellers around the nation. So please, yes, look us up. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and you get to see me in my colorful tie-dye lab coat on there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Did You Hear? We are ready to recommend some books, and we're staying on the kids' theme. So, as you know, our summer theme is a universe of stories, and so that's all about space and astronauts and planets, all kinds of good stuff. And so who better to bring in to talk about kids' books that talk about all those subjects? Who's better than Dennis Ross? We brought the all-star. And so
many answers to that
I should
question.
say hi, welcome, Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Dennis, you're on KCUR all the time on Steve Kraski's show. Is this a little bit different for you?
This is, a little bit different. That's twice a year.
Yeah, okay.
And that's live radio, so we don't get to back up and cut things out we don't like.
Right.
And we pretty much just talk about whatever kids and teens books that we want to recommend. And we usually give it a theme, but we only stick with the theme if we feel like it. Kind of like today.
Yeah. Well, today's theme's pretty cool, though. I think if I were a kid, this would be right up my alley. I think I discovered sci-fi pretty early, and so maybe this is kind of the doorway for kids to go into sci-fi. A short little note. So I have a daughter, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was a kid, when she was a kid, she would watch Star Trek with me.
Right.
And I was like, Hazel, why do you like watching Star Trek? And she's like, well, you learn about space. And I'm like, it's not real, right?
That's funny.
Yeah, that's all right. So what kind of books did you bring today to talk about?
Well, I did bring pretty much all space books. And to my mind, that the theme, a universe of stories, is suitably vague. I mean, you can make it be anything you want.
Right.
It could be any kind of stories. But today I did bring books about space and space travel, and some of them are more informational than others. And they're all for different age groups. You want to talk about some of them?
Yeah.
There's one that's bound to be a crowd pleaser. It's called How Do You Burp in Space? And Other Tips Every Space Tourist Needs to Know.
And your colleague just told me that books that say that are about burping or farting are big.
Oh, yeah. With kids, anything
big
about
success.
burp,
Big
bodily
success with the
functions,
kids.
anything about underwear, you got them. You're there. And this one is really written as a tourist guide. So how to get oriented, how to plan your trip, what to take with you, what to expect when you get to space. It's got all kinds of travel alerts and travel tips all the way through it. Lots of really fun pictures. What's on about food and going to the bathroom in space, and what happens when you get sick in space. And there's all kinds of little boxes that are called travel alert or space tip or space story. So they've got photos and stories of real astronauts on the space shuttle and their experiences, and what's the best time to go, the best season, and the right lingo to use. So it's really just full of lots of fun things about traveling in space. Yeah.
How's the artwork?
It's very fun. There are kind of cartoony illustrations, but there's a lot of photos also of real space travel. So it's broken up into boxes of different sizes and shapes and colors. So it's very visually appealing.
Neat. So what was the title of that one again?
How Do You Burp in Space?
Okay, and who's the author and the illustrator?
Let's see. The author, I'll have to look in the front, is Susan Goodman.
Okay.
And it's illustrated by Michael Slack.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
All right. Wow, that sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
Let's move on to
That'd
book
be for
number.
grade school age kids.
Yeah, grade school. All right.
Yeah. Another one that is also nonfiction that's for a younger audience is called Birthday on Mars. And it's written by Sarah Schoenfeld.
All right.
And illustrated by Andrew Ross, no relation. And this is narrated by Curiosity, which is one of our Mars rovers that we've sent up to land on Mars and scoot around and try to discover things for us. My name is Curiosity, and I live on Mars. And Mars is telling the story of, or Curiosity, is telling the story of its experiences on Mars. And this is based on a true story. We have sent a number of rovers up there, and Curiosity is one of them. And as it happens in the book, Curiosity rover really did sing happy birthday to itself.
Wow.
After it had been on Mars for a year back in 2013.
Was it prompted to do that? Or programmed?
Now, it doesn't say that.
Prompted, programmed.
It might have been, yeah.
Or did it come up with that on its own? Artificial
It
intelligence?
doesn't say in the notes in the back about that. That's a good question. I'd like to think that it came up with it on its own, but it is just a machine, right?
Yeah.
Happy birthday to me, it's saying.
One thing I noticed right away is that there's a lot less text in this book as opposed to the last one. So this is for younger group of readers,
this
right?
is in our E nonfiction, E for easy, and it's up to preschool through first grade or so.
Yeah.
Obviously meant to be read aloud to kids with one line or so on each page. Really fun illustrations, I think.
Yeah,
really,
the illustrations fill the entire page,
Right.
whereas the last book,
Right.
you had little boxes, little windows that had different illustrations and factoids.
And and so the text is geared for that age group also. Curiosity says things like, "You might think it's lonely here, but I talk to my friends on Earth every day. I tell them what I've learned and send them pictures of what I've seen." So it's not exactly the way you would, phrase it for a 4th to 6th grader, but it gets the point across.
Right.
So, and I thought it was pretty fun. It's really pretty new, too. In fact, it just came out this month.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so once again,
new.
that's Birthday on Mars. And who's the author?
By Sarah
illustrator?
Schoenfeld.
Okay. And
We can look it up for you by title.
Can't leave out that illustrator.
Oh, the illustrator, right. Andrew Ross.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty fun. I found that on the new bookshelf.
Okay. Once again, we are exploring our catalog, all of the fun space books that are appropriate for all kinds of kids readers to embrace our summer reading theme, which is a universe of stories. So let's blast off with the next title.
Well, this one I like really a lot, too. It just came out last year. It's called Hidden Figures, the true story of 4 black women and the space race. And these women, their story has been told in a number of different ways for all ages. They're adult books with the same title, and books in the J section for upper elementary and middle school kids. This is in the E section for a younger audience again. But it's the same story.
Made into a Hollywood movie as well.
It was made into a Hollywood movie, and it's about Catherine, Dorothy, Mary, and Christine, who were all good at math.
How often does that happen, Dennis, where there's, some Hollywood movie and then there's versions of a book of the movie or of the story for all different levels.
Well, this one, as far as I know, the book was probably written first before the movie.
Sure.
If you see it where there's an edited or a version for teens and grade school and young kids and all about the same story, that means that all comes after a Hollywood hit.
Okay, sure.
There's a big hit movie that everybody already knows the story, and so they want to start making versions to sell for all kinds of age groups.
Right.
And I'm sure that's what happened here, because this just came out last year.
And it's a good and important story.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it
right.
makes sense. You want to share it with
Yeah, and this
younger
one,
kids.
one thing I really like about it is that it is simplified for a younger audience, but it's not dumbed down.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Okay.
the text is written in such a way that, maybe kindergarten to second graders could understand what they're saying, but it's not, it's not dumbed down. So the only way I can think to put it. It's
right.
really, really well written. One interesting thing about it is so the story and the line that keeps getting repeated throughout the book in each of these four women's stories is that they were good at math, and as it says, really good, really good at math. And actually they aren't called women; they're called computers. These people were so good at math that they actually became computers.
Sure.
Which was our version of computers during World War II, and then after World War II, and then in the early days of the space race, and in the late 1950s and the 60s, they were actually our living computers. They and other people like them that helped us get into space successfully and come back alive.
Computed well.
Right. So they're called computers all the way through. And the other thing that keeps getting repeated is our lines like, because she didn't give up and because she fought, they kept getting nothing but resistance. They were black women, so I mean, that was two strikes against them right off the bat when wanting to be involved in something like this. No women were allowed in the first place, and then especially not black women, but they were so good and they wouldn't give up.
Yeah.
They kept pushing and they kept trying, and then because of that, because they kept fighting, they became the first to do this and the first to do that, and when John Glenn was about to be launched into our first orbit, he wanted Catherine to double check the calculations before they blasted him off into space. That's how good a computer she was.
Wow.
So they were really good, and they pushed, and they fought, and that's why their story's so compelling.
Yeah. And isn't that how so many good stories go, that you're faced against insurmountable odds, but somehow you overcome the adversity.
Right. You need to have the talent and the ability first, but you also have to stick with it. And so, anyway, the author's name is Margot Lee Shetterly, and I'm pretty sure that's the author of the adult version of the book, too.
Oh, okay.
And it's illustrated by Laura Freeman. And I think she's done some other kids' books, too, that I haven't read. But they both did a very good job on this. It also includes a timeline in the back and more glossary and author's notes to explain a little bit more, and short biographies of each of the four women. So it's just really, really well done book. It's worth reading together with your children. Yeah,
that looks pretty excellent. So what is the next Out of This World selection that you have for us?
This is an old favorite of mine that I was really happy to see we still own. In fact, there was a new edition that just came out a few years ago. It's called Company's Coming.
Company's Coming.
Yes, by Arthur Yorinks.
Okay.
And David Small, who are really well-known names in the world of children's picture books, especially. Yorinks actually has won a Caldecott Medal for a book called Hey Al. And David Small has written and illustrated many, many books for children.
Okay.
The classic Imogene's Antlers, among others. But
I'm dying to know, are they out of the company that's coming, are they from outer space?
They are.
Oh my gosh.
Indeed, yes. This is about a nice couple named Shirley and Mo. And Shirley had invited all the relatives to dinner, and Mo was getting the yard mowed and getting the grill ready when, guess what lands in the backyard?
A
spaceship that looks a lot like a Weber grill, but two young aliens pop out and ask if they might use the bathroom. And Mo's taken aback, but Shirley is very warm and welcoming all the way through the story, and he's afraid that that they were going to get blasted by ray guns and they're dangerous and we shouldn't be trusting them. And she's like, just calm down. We can be friends with everybody. And the strangers are all excited about, visiting some more, and it's what a lovely house you have, and we're from far away, and of course he wants to run him off and call the Army, and Shirley wants to invite him back for dinner. So they say, sure, we'll be back at 6 o'clock, and while they're off and she's getting dinner ready, he's calling the National Guard and the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, and before they're due to arrive back, the house is surrounded by, the same kind of scene you've seen in the movies many times, and the relatives are all here by then, and when they show up, they bring in a gift, and of course that Mo's all, threatened by that too, and Shirley's offering him drinks and potato salad, and the neighbors are getting to know, or the relatives are getting to know him too. It's really just, the illustrations are just as much fun as the story. That's the best part about it. They really are.
The illustrations kind of look to me like colorized versions of political cartoons you'd see in the New Yorker.
Yeah, David Small is excellent. I wouldn't be surprised if he had done some of those. It doesn't say so on the back flap of the book, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like they're adult-oriented or anything, but they definitely they have a unique style to them. They're fun.
They have a lot of adult appeal, that's for sure.
They seem to have a lot of expression in the faces.
Oh yeah, that's one of his best skills, I think. Anyway, about the time they're getting ready to open the present and the armed forces are getting ready to blast them, it turns out it's a blender, which Shirley just loves because she didn't have one, and it was so thoughtful, and it was on sale, the Spaceman beam. So luckily she had made extra spaghetti and meatballs, and everybody had a nice dinner together. It's just it's really a fun story.
There's a happy ending. That's great.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So
Company's Coming.
Yeah, by Arthur Yorinks.
By Arthur Yorinks.
Yeah, that's really a fun one.
Illustrated by David Small.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And both of those names are worth looking up for their other works.
Yeah, he's a Caldecott Medal winner, and you mentioned that before.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yorinks did, and David Small has done all kinds of great books.
I think we should stop here and mention the Caldecott Award, because I think a lot of times we as folks that work in a library just assume that everyone is up on that. But, but that's the award for the best children's illustrator every year, correct?
Yes. It's for, I forget the exact language, but it's illustrations in a book for children, either published in the United States or by an illustrator who lives in the United States, one or the other.
And it's voted on by librarians, correct?
There's a committee, a different committee every year.
Okay.
Chosen by the Children's Division of ALA, the American Library Association.
Wow.
And it's I forgot, 13 to 15 different people every year.
Okay.
Who read many, many hundreds of books all year long, and discuss them online with each other, and narrow them down as the year goes along, and then they meet at the American Library Association Midwinter Conference, and lock themselves in a room for 2 or 3 days and hash it out.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Very strict judging guidelines and very strict rules about how the votes are taken and counted, and it's a big deal.
I have a very naive question for you. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been on the selection committee?
I have not.
Well, those of you out there in podcast land, let's make this happen. Let's start the Dennis Ross campaign for Caldecott judging today.
We have a number of Johnson County Library staff who have been on that committee and other award committees, such as the Newbery Medal and I think even the Prince Award, but and the Audies for audiobooks. We've had a number of our staff have been chosen for those committees in the past, and they're very, that makes me unhappy, but they always abide by the rule to not disclose any of the discussion of the committee. That is one of the first rules. It stays, whatever's talked about in that room stays in that room.
Oh, but that's some of the most fun part.
People have done their best to pry it out of them, and as far as I know, every one of them has stuck to their promise.
Well, I mean, it's all opinion, so there's nothing wrong with that. And so hearing the inside scoop on how the decisions are made, I think that would be very interesting.
Well, it's also, it's not just a big deal to librarians, it's a big deal to publishing companies and the authors. A book that wins a medal like that has a tremendous boost in sales and prestige, and all that's very important to publishing companies.
I see.
And there's a lot of politics involved
in
this things that might have been said to
it potentially could become very formulaic, right? That if some of how a winning illustration is determined, if you could say, well, that's the way to do it, then you lose a lot of creativity.
Right.
You get a lot of,
and they need to feel free
right.
to speak, openly and honestly with each other,
sure.
without fear of having their comments repeated, especially negative ones. Sometimes in stories that I've heard that are, said just in general terms without giving anything away, about how, the difference between one book winning and another book not winning can be a very tiny, tiny little picky detail.
Yeah.
Or any other negative comments might not make some people happy.
Sure,
Yeah,
and
so.
that totally makes sense. I
Right.
I love competition shows.
Right.
Like one that I really love is called Top Chef. And
Right.
so in the beginning, it's pretty easy to figure out who's on the bottom because you burn a protein, hey, you
Right.
gotta go. You use too much salt,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But when they get down to the top 4 chefs, they're all so good that you could hit it out of the park.
Right.
But there's just something that's a slight preference.
And I think there's a lot of that. That's probably fairly similar to what happens in
Yeah.
these committees. I mean, people that I know that have been on them will say that in those kind of general terms. Yes,
Right.
it was a very tiny little thing.
Right, and it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong.
Right.
It's just opinion or just a preference because you're forced into having to make that decision.
Yes.
There has to be one winner, right?
Well, and this year's award winners and honor winners might very well not have been winners with last year's committee or next year's committee.
Right.
There's all different people every time.
Fascinating.
So that kind of adds to the fun of it. It's a big deal in the library community and also with authors and illustrators and publishers.
Yeah, especially knowing how difficult it is to
Yeah.
finalize that one winner.
Right.
Oh boy. Okay, well, let's jump back into our list of
Yeah.
space-themed books for kids
Yeah,
to
we got
celebrate
one or
our
two
summer
more
reading
here.
theme, a universe of stories.
Well, one or two. This one is called Almost Astronauts, 13 Women Who Dared to Dream. And it's the true story of the Mercury 13 women. And it's written by Tanya Lee Stone. And I think it's published, with the cooperation of the Smithsonian. It's actually a misnomer, as it says in the front. These 13 women were never really part of the Mercury space program, but they went through many of the same tests that the Mercury astronauts did. Okay. And that's what this story is about. These women really wanted to be astronauts, and this is back in the early days of our space program, and when Mercury and the test pilots who had the right stuff were going through all kinds of tests and intensive training to see if they were the right people to get blasted off into space.
Right.
And this was 20 years before the U.S. officially admitted women into the astronaut program. So there were these 13 women, and they were fighting like those other women. They were fighting for their right to go into space too. They went through all the same training programs, the same tests. They proved eventually that they really were not only as tough as the toughest men, but they were brave enough to challenge the government. So there were politics involved in and outside of the space program. So the book, in addition to telling the story of these 13 amazing women, it includes a lot of beautiful photographs of them and their training and documents, but it also gives a lot of context about the struggle for women's liberation in the 50s and 60s, the context that was happening in the wider world, and the breakthroughs in science and technology that the space program brought about, and how they were involved in that. It has details about the training and the tests they went through. It's got the pictures of, the dunk tank where they strap them in and turn them upside down underwater, and all the same thing the men were doing. It's a kind of a fast read for a nonfiction book. It's not very thick, and it's got lots of photos, lots of good notes, and pictures of them at a reunion. When the first woman who piloted a space shuttle, before that launch, they were all invited to sit in the front row at the launch site for that particular launch. And of course, they were quite a bit older by then, but it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And so there's pictures of that also. and other pictures of other female astronauts in the space shuttle and people who finally did get to fly with men.
Great photographs.
Yeah, great photographs. Wow. It's just a really
what a great piece of history, huh?
Yeah, and it's really well written too. They were almost astronauts. 13 out of the 11 surviving members, 8 of them made it to that kind of reunion launch celebration. And there's a picture of Eileen Collins, the first woman to command a space shuttle, getting suited up for that launch. And she thought it was a pretty big deal that these other women had invited too.
Neat.
Yeah. So it's really, it's another one of those stories that you don't get to hear a lot about if you just learn about the space program by watching TV.
Sure.
But I find these kind of stories very interesting.
Very good. What was the name of that one again?
This one's called Almost Astronauts, 13 Women Who Dared to Dream. Yeah.
The True Story of the Mercury 13 Women. Mm-hmm. It's by Tanya Lee Stone.
Tanya Lee Stone. And again, that's NRJ nonfiction. So I would say, upper elementary and middle school.
Yeah, it looked like a more advanced reader, but
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Good piece.
But
of
once you get into it, it's really, really interesting, and it goes fast.
Okay.
And I did bring one other one that I was disappointed to see we don't have very many books in this old series left.
Oh, okay.
But I grabbed it anyway just for fun in case we had time for one more. And it's called Earthmobiles.
Earthmobiles,
as explained by Professor Zargle.
I love it.
It's written by Jean Willis, and illustrated by Tony Ross. There's a whole series of these.
Is Professor Zargle the kind of bird-like looking alien creature on roller skates?
Actually,
on the front?
these are all aliens.
Okay.
The first one was called Earthlets. In fact, it's translated into human by Jeannie Willis. It's not written by Jeannie Willis. And these are from the late 80s and early 90s, and I was disappointed to see that they were not available anymore. But Professor Zargle has a class of young aliens on whatever planet they live on, and his job is to teach them about life on Earth.
Okay.
And his explanations about how Earthlets live are pretty entertaining.
And he has 3 eyes.
Oh, yeah, and the kids do too. So he tries to describe how human transportation works.
How fun.
And, yeah.
The illustration reminds me of Schoolhouse Rock a little bit.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Tony Ross's his illustrations are always very, very humorous.
Yeah.
So they show bucking broncos, people trying to ride horses back in the old days, and he's trying to explain bicycles, but he calls it a 2-wheeled spin-mobile. You balance yourself on the seat and grip the front prongs with your tentacles and quickly bounce up and down. So anyway, all the books are like this. It's Professor Zargle trying to explain Earth life to his young students in his own way, which is,
what a great angle for a story.
He calls cars stink fumers.
Stink fumers.
Yes. Yes, the Earthlings have to rub their stink fumer until it shines every Sunday, and then lie underneath it and tickle its tummy with a metal fork. And inside, sometimes he hangs fuzzy cubes with dots on them. And he explains water travel in his own way to describe boats.
Yeah.
And so this is the one about Earthlet transportation. That's why it's called Earthmobiles.
Earthmobiles, gotcha.
So unfortunately, like I said, we don't own very many of the rest of the books in this series. It was one of my personal favorites in the old days, but it's very, very funny for young readers. Will get a kick out of it. They like that absurd humor, the silly things, like the stupids and the dumb bunnies, and just really silly, stupid things. They really, really like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So once again, that was Earthmobiles, as explained by Professor Zargle.
Yeah.
And translated by Jean Willis.
Right.
Illustrated by Tony
Ross.
Okay. Wow. Dennis, that's not enough. It's really not. But we have a place that folks can go.
That's right.
You can go talk to your local youth services librarian. They'll be happy to give you give you all kinds of suggestions and direct you to where you can find all kinds of books. Mm-hmm. You can also go to jocolibrary.org. Check out our catalog. It's a great time to introduce kids how to search the catalog. Mm-hmm. You could do a keyword search, right, for space.
Right.
And today you presented both nonfiction and fiction, and so lots of different levels. And the way you figure out if you can read it is you open it up.
Right. Check the first page, check the flap.
Yeah.
We all have our old favorites like I did, and we have lists, many lists you can search.
Sure.
And, there's many ways to find what you want, yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming by today to talk about some books about space for kids that help us celebrate our summer reading theme, which once again is A Universe of Stories. Did we miss a question you wish we would have asked? Do you have thoughts or stories about today's topic? Share them with us on Facebook, facebook.com/Joko Library.
And now, our writer's quote of the day. I'm Amy Field, and I'm on the Johnson County Library web content team. And here's one of my favorite author quotes by Catherine M. Valente from The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. Stories have a way of changing faces. They are unruly things, undisciplined, given to delinquency and the throwing of erasers. This is why we must close them up into thick, solid books so they cannot get out and cause trouble.
We leave you with sounds from one of our locations. It's your audio minute we call Library Zen.
You're right. I knew that you guys knew it. But I'll do one last one. This is a really good one for a hot day. Frosty the Snowman. Is that a good one for a hot day? Doesn't it just sort of cool you down?
For more episodes of Did You Hear, go to the Johnson County Library website, jocolibrary.org/didyouhear.